morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on what could be considered a gloomy day here in Los Angeles. The sun's only kind of out, so it's a tough day for us here in LA. My name is Jose Parra, and I want to thank you to our LA County Library virtual event, Creative Paths. And I'll be your host today. Today's program is part of a series exploring careers in entertainment, film, TV, and media industries. In today's program, director and producer Kimberly Browning will have a conversation with our guests from Warner Brothers Games to talk about the video game industry. I'm going to start by introducing our presenter today. But while I'm doing that, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. So please say hello in the chat and share with us what you expect or what you hope to learn from this presentation today. It is my pleasure today to introduce Ms. Kimberly Browning, who will be moderating our conversation after the presentation. Kimberly is a filmmaker based here in Los Angeles and is founder and festival director of Hollywood Short Films Festival, which launched in 1998. She is an associate short film programmer at the Tribeca Film Festival and a senior programmer at Catalyst Content Festival. She has been the executive producer of HBO Access since 2015. It is now part of the new Warner Media Access program team, developing emerging writers and directors in episodic television. We also have with our guest with us today from Warner Games, executive producer Kirsten Gavin and engineer Gavin Freyberg. And with that, I will now hand it over to Kirsten to start us off.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Gavin and I are super excited to present a little bit about game production and engineering. So I will just dive right into it. So first we want to introduce ourselves a little bit. My name is Kirsten, and I'll let Gavin introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Gavin.
And I have been at Warner Brothers for about 16, 17 years. I'm currently an executive producer on a game called Hogwarts Legacy, but I've worked on a wide variety of titles over the years here at WB. Gavin, do you want to talk a little bit about your background here?
Sure. I've been with Warner Brothers for about 15 or 16 years. It's sort of backdated through multiple company purchases because Warner Brothers Games has only existed for about 12 years.
Yep. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about sort of our journeys to get to where we are. So my journey towards the games industry actually started with me working as a project manager for a localization company called Lionbridge. And localization is basically translating content from one language to another, as well as making it culturally appropriate. So I wasn't doing the translation, but I was managing all the facets of it at that company. Then Disney was actually a big client of mine, and they asked me to move to LA to work for them, and it just happened to be for their games group. So while working at Disney, I got to know characters like Piglet and Pooh and Lilo and Stitch and Treasure Planet. Those were some of the early games I worked on while at Disney years and years ago. From there, I eventually met someone at Universal Interactive who took a chance on me, and I started working on the Fast and Furious video game as an associate producer, most of which I spent my time on researching car parts and learning the ropes of game production. And from there, I moved to Warner Brothers Games, and I've worked here for most of my career over the last 16 years on everything from Hogwarts Legacy, which I'm currently working on, back to the all of the original Scribblenauts games, Lego Dimensions, a game called Pamoja Matani, which we did in conjunction with the US State Department for Kids in Africa, and Shadow of War, which was our game based on the Lord of the Rings franchise. Gavin, you're up.
Hi. Sorry. I actually started off not in the games industry, like even more distant from the games industry than Kirsten did with her localization. I started out for what was then a catalog sales company called EasyBuy, but I've always been a software engineer. So because Kirsten had the definition of localization, I thought I'd better put the definition of software engineering in there. So it's basically a branch of computer science where where we design and implement and maintain complex computer systems. So we kind of like to consider ourselves engineers rather than just sort of coders, because the problems get very complex and that requires engineering work processes. From there, I actually had my break in the games industry in the UK. I was there at about the year 2000, and I was having trouble finding a job, actually, because everyone was scared about year 2000, loads of software engineers, and then it wasn't really a thing after the fact. And so it was quite hard to find a job as a software engineer over in the UK then. So I wrote some demos and put together some information, and I got my first job for Reflections Interactive, working on the Driver video game. Next slide, thanks, Kirsten. From there, I shifted to another studio called Pitbull Syndicate, which was working for Midway Games. I worked on LA Rush there, which is an open world driving video game, just like Driver was. And we then got purchased by Midway and became Midway Games Newcastle, and worked on the Vin Diesel video game Wheelman. And after that, Midway Games went bankrupt, actually. I moved to Chicago as part of Midway Games, and Midway Games went bankrupt and got bought by Warner Brothers Games. And this is sort of the story of how I have been at Warner Brothers Games for longer than Warner Brothers Games has actually existed as a thing. And so I worked for NetherRealm Studios there, working on Injustice 2, Mortal Kombat 2011, Mortal Kombat X, and Mortal Kombat 11. And I now manage a group of engineers as the Central Games Technology team. Oh, and I should point out my photo of Peeps. The reason why Peeps is there is because you'll probably hear him at some point during my presentation. He always shows up. So there's, just so that both of the speakers on my end are covered, there's a picture of Peeps.
We should also note that Gavin's actually joining us from New Zealand, which is super fun. So that hence the accent, and he's up really early to join us, so we appreciate it. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Warner Brothers Games, or we were previously known as WB Games. We originally started out licensing games to other publishers like EA, and then we started making games ourselves. And we sort of got into our first test game with a game called Friends, the one with all the trivia. I worked on that one. And ultimately had our first breakout hit with Batman Arkham Asylum, and then went on to publish additional games in the Scribblenauts franchise. And those are the games that really got us going as a publisher. What's cool about my experience here is that I worked on original like Harry Potter licensed games when we were working with EA, and now I'm actually working on our own Harry Potter based Wizarding World game. So it's all come full circle. We have 12 development studios or creative studios in many different parts of the world. And we have publishing hubs both in Burbank and in London. And we'll explain a little bit about publishing versus development here in a moment. We have 6 of our studios focused on console games and 5 focused on mobile games. And then we have 1 technical that focuses on the back-end tech for a lot of our products. And Gavin works very closely with them, actually works closely with all of our studios. Some of our past releases include iconic games like Gavin mentioned within the Mortal Kombat franchise, all of the games in the Scribblenauts franchise, a number of different Harry Potter mobile games, the entire Batman Arkham series, Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, and some people don't know, but all of the Lego games. So if any of you have kids or are Lego game fanatics yourselves, all of those games also come out of Warner Brothers games. And we also have some newer mobile games like Game of Thrones. And then we have a bunch of upcoming releases that are coming out, big AAA titles with Hogwarts Legacy, which I've mentioned, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League from our Rocksteady studio, Gotham Knights from our studio in Montreal, and Back 4 Blood, which actually just launched in the last couple of weeks. Super excited. So the rest of our time today, we're going to cover the industry overall, and then we're going to do some deep dives into production and engineering. And we will cap that off with a case study by Gavin on smart gases, which is a really fun case study based on a game called Obra. So I'm going to pass this off to Gavin to cover a bit about the industry. Gavin, just tell me when you want me to click.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, look. So the games industry is predominantly, or should I say the AAA games industry is predominantly in the USA and Europe right now. What I mean by AAA games is that's big budget games versus indie games, which tend to be very much smaller teams and are located all over the world. So there tend to be hubs in certain areas of the country. Montreal is a big games development hub in Canada. LA and Seattle are big development hubs in the US, which, you know, is good if you're here watching this, because that means LA County Library, you're going to have good access to game development studios and be able to get a job in the industry. There are loads of different positions in game teams doing a lot of different things. Games development is incredibly complicated. It's probably not rocket science, but Elon Musk has actually said that he likes hiring engineers, software engineers from the games industry, because they've already faced very complex problems and know how to problem solve. So you're going to be part of a large team, especially if you're working on AAA games. You're always going to be part of a team. There just are too many different roles to fill in order to make a game for you to be able to do it alone these days, except for rare exceptions. And in fact, our case study is one of those rare exceptions. Loads of people want to be in games, and there are just so many opportunities in the games industry that whatever you enjoy doing, you're probably going to be able to find a role in the games industry if you're willing to work at it, develop yourself a little bit, and go look for a position. Next slide, please. So publishers are the part of the industry that handles a lot of the marketing, a lot of the making sure games stay on track. If you could just get all of the bits of the slide up, that would be great. Sorry, Kirsten.
No problem.
They're often paying for the title to be developed, covering the costs for the title to be developed, and are in general provide a whole heap of the underlying functions, so marketing, operations, PR, community, finance, that type of thing. But also they often support QA and other parts of game testing process to make sure that that the studios are supported and can release high quality titles. Next slide, please. So developers are, I have a weird box on my screen. Sorry, I'm going to have to bring this up on my own page so I can keep tab with the slides.
Oh, so, I think I know what's going on. Did that work?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
So developers or studios are the people who actually design and build the game and essentially put together what comes in the box, or most of what comes in the box, which obviously we don't actually have boxes as often anymore. So you may need, they may need to get approval for parts of the game that they're building. You know, they're building the artwork, but sometimes the artwork has could have copyright material in it, and we'd have to go and get a license to that. You also have to be very careful what you put in the games as a developer, because it's very easy to go past a rating boundary. So mature ratings or teen ratings or everyone ratings, depending on what your content is. It's very easy to add something that you're not thinking about it, and you just go past one of those rating boundaries, which can be very impactful on your target audience. They also are basically handling all of the day-to-day of making a game and making all of the decisions on the game. If there are big scope changes, that's going to be required to be approved by the publisher, but most of the time, all of the decisions are happening in studio. And they tend to have internal HR teams, IT teams, and often community-facing people as well. Yes. Right, games are expensive. They've gotten more and more expensive every year that I've been in the industry. I think a big game when I was starting out was probably $5 million for a big game. And these days, a big game is $250 million plus. So you can get everything from an indie game, which costs very little to make, to what they're now calling quadruple A games, which are games with multiple studios working on them and huge budgets. They take a lot of people to make. The team at NetherRealm was between 150 and 200 people internally, with a whole heap of people helping make the game outside of the studio as well. Some games, such as the Assassin's Creed games, have multiple studios working on them and up to thousands of people. So some of these games get very large, and some of them take a very long time to develop. You can, again, have games that for mobile, which have a very fast turnaround time, but you can equally have games that are taking up to about 7 years now to make. It's not unheard of, and some games even go past that. Thanks. So, as I was alluding to earlier, games need a lot of people. They're actually pretty complex now. There's a lot of different disciplines, and I'll quickly go through them. So you've got your animation and art teams, you've got your audio teams, you've got writing staff, you've got support staff in HR, finance, IT. You've got production staff who help make sure we're actually all staying on track and are working on the right things. You have designers who are designing what the game actually looks and feels to play. And then you've got engineering teams who are the ones who write the code to allow the designers and sometimes the art staff to do what they need to do in order to be able to make the game and to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. I would also note that all of those disciplines are actually in larger teams broken down into subdisciplines. So for art and animation, you could have cinematics animators, you could have gameplay animators, you can have technical riggers, you can have character artists. And sorry, I shouldn't say can, you will, in a large team, have all of these roles. You have, in design, you have technical designers, you have level designers, you have gameplay designers, you have combat designers. In engineering, you have engine engineers, you have gameplay engineers, you have network engineers, you have rendering engineers, and the list goes on. That's just some of the big categories. So it actually gets really, this is like a hierarchy. So these are the large top level disciplines, but even under those disciplines, you get a lot of specialization.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks.
Gavin. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about video game production for a few minutes, and then I will pass the baton. So in our business, as we've talked about, I'm just going to put all the bullets on screen here as well. Publishers provide the funding or the money and the marketing expertise. So basically, how to get folks to buy the game. We also, as publishers, provide operations expertise, so how to actually get the game onto your PS4 or Xbox, and distribution, how that box or even digitally, a digital distribution of content actually makes it into either an online or a physical store. And then developers do all the stuff that actually like make up the game concept, program the animations, write the story, and provide the game its art direction. Some publishers actually own developers. Like we mentioned, we have, as Warner Brothers Games, we're a publisher and we have 12 studios. And there are also some developers that still independently operate and partner with publishers. So for instance, the Back 4 Blood game we mentioned earlier is a third-party studio that we partnered with in order to publish and release that game. So a lot of times publishers will own studios, but we also work with external partners. And we can be involved all the way at the very start of the game. We can also get involved midway through a project. There's a lot of different ways that publishers and developers work together, but ideas can come from anywhere. I've definitely seen ideas come on the dev side, but also on the publishing side. And from a sort of outlook and attitude perspective, I always like to kind of start with like, what makes a good producer? And there's a lot of different attributes. You need to be organized. You really need to think of problems before they happen, ask tons of questions, and really understand that other people have ideas. They may or may not be right, but you need to be open to all of them. And you need to play lots of different games and be open to working with a lot of different kinds of people. From an education standpoint, production people come from all different education levels and backgrounds. Truly, like I work with so many different kinds of people that have gotten into the industry from a variety of different ways. There's not one specific entry point. I was able to start in the localization department at Disney, for example, but a lot of people start testing games through something called quality assurance or QA. We also have some great interns that we've had work with us over the years that we've ultimately hired. So there's a lot of entry points there. There's also, as Gavin mentioned, with all the different sort of facets and subgenres of engineers and artists and whatnot, there's a lot of different kinds of producers. So if you want to get into game production, you could be a technical producer. You'd be working really closely with people like Gavin, kind of driving the technology of the game. Or you can be someone like me, who's more kind of project management focused. I'm really focused on the time and budget needed to bring a game to market. And there's also creative producers who really get in and help drive the creative facets of game development. So as you're thinking about going to college or furthering an education, you can study a wide variety of options to get into the games industry, like game design, game production, just business, programming. I mean, my college education is in communication, and it just happens to be I'm a good writer, so that ended up translating into being a good producer. So there's a lot of different ways to get into the industry and use the skills that you've developed to help drive you there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the production pipeline itself. Game production typically follows a standard pipeline for both small and large games, starting with pre-production. The number of people grows to its highest point during the production phase and then starts to taper off in post-production. And pre-production ends with something that we like to call a vertical slice, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Production ends with something called an alpha, and post-production ends with something called submission, where we actually have to submit our game, all of the code, to either Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo. Those are the platform holders, and they actually allow us to publish on their platform. So once we've gone through and completed our game, they have to test it on their platforms to make sure we meet all of their requirements. So first we'll talk a little bit about the pre-production phase. This is where the creatives meet in lots of design meetings and they come up with the core creative of the game. We also research lots of other games in the genres we're making. We plan what platforms we're going to support. Are we going to support PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, Epic? Are we going to support old gen like PS4 or new gen like PS5? What the sort of market is going to bear for a game that we're making, and like which platform it makes the most sense on. So we do tons of research in that way. We also do a lot of systems building, and sort of creating the baseline of what the game is going to be. And here are some examples of some prototypes. These are just prototypes. So this was like us showing a bot in Unreal and using a, to kind of see what a spell might look like in our Hogwarts Legacy game. And then this video over here is just how some of the early prototypes of a raid might look like in a mobile game that accompanied our Shadow of War game. So after pre-production is complete, as I mentioned, it sort of ends with something that we call a vertical slice, which is basically one of everything. So I found this picture and I thought it was a really good indication of sort of what a vertical slice really looks like. It's a demo of the most interesting or anticipated gameplay at a high production quality. So if you take all the different segments of a game that you want to have in your final product, whether it's RPG elements, adventure components, physics puzzles, logic puzzles, whatever all that content is, you want to take one small slice of it, bring it up to super high quality so that everybody can understand the kind of game you're making, and also so that you can figure out how long it took to get to that slice, and then be able to kind of multiply that out and understand and forecast how long it's going to take you to finish your product. So as an example, in a game like Zelda, one of their sort of vertical slice loops would be this concept of crafting, where hunting and crafting and health potions are all needed to work together to create a fun and interesting experience that would want to keep folks playing the game and moving forward. So after you finish your, after you get through pre-production, which depends, like pre-production could take 6 months, it could take 3 months, it could take 2 years, it depends on how big your game is. But once you get to that vertical slice component, you're ready to move into the production phase. And the production phase is where you take that one of everything and you start making it at scale. So game creators are busy making content, fleshing out the game. Producers are planning for things like testing, what kind of rating we might get. Is it going to be E for everyone, T for teen, a mature rating? What we're going to do about content after we launch, how we are going to market the game, and so much more. And the studio creatives on the development side are tracking their tasks so we can judge how long it will take to complete them. We also start talking to folks like Microsoft or Sony about partnerships, and we start getting the game in front of users to see whether or not it's fun. That's called usability and playtesting. And finally, we start testing the game in depth to make sure we can make it as bug-free as possible by the time we launch. So kind of a side note here, I talked about usability and playtesting, and even within our, within the people that I work with, sometimes people don't quite understand the difference between those two. And we use a lot of user research as we are in the throes of production in our games. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about what that means. So usability is small groups. We basically engage user research groups to do this usability testing, which those are one-on-one sessions with a moderator around the different facets of how the game actually plays. Like, did this mechanic work? Did you like the way this combat felt? Very like, we're really trying to get to the gameplay itself and how it's interesting. With playtesting, we have larger groups playing the game for longer periods of time, and that's more like tracking balance and fun and the overall experience, not whether this particular mechanic in this puzzle was fun or not. So through these different user research methods, we measure a lot of different things. So we're looking at sustained engagement, whether you're going to want to come back and keep playing. We're also measuring competence, which how do you feel, and do you know how you do you feel good about playing the game? Do you feel like you're able to master the game and move forward? We also measure relatedness and how you relate or identify with the story or characters. And then sort of autonomy, volition, choice. Are we giving players choice in their decisions? Do players feel like they, it's not just hand of the designer driving them forward, but are we giving players the choice to, they believe that they're making in the game themselves? And we'll do many, many rounds of both usability and playtesting throughout the course of our projects to help achieve our quality goals. After we go through the long piece of production, and production can last years in and of itself, because it's going to take a long time to not only create the content, but test it and make it fun. That's really the nugget of what we're doing to try to make a great game. We head into post-production, and post-production usually starts with something called an alpha, and that's a content complete build that may or may not be at the best quality, but at least has everything there. Then we'll go to beta, where everything is there at high quality and we're just fixing bugs to get the game to great. And when we're done with post, we actually submit the game to all the first parties for their approval. And so that would include Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Steam, all of those different platforms. And after we launch a game, we typically support it with more free or paid content. And we sometimes need to fix bugs with something called a patch if users find issues that we weren't able to find for ourselves. So from a logistical standpoint on a production side, my daily tasks typically include lots of emails, lots of meetings, lots of calls, both with our dev teams, with our tech teams, marketing teams, ops teams, business development, whomever. The producer is basically the hub, and like that a hub and spoke approach. So I'm fielding meetings and emails and calls with lots of different groups. We're also reviewing the documentation. We're playing the game. We're giving feedback on the game, and we're providing updates on development to all these different facets on the publishing team, like marketing, public relations, ops, external partners, and so on and so forth. We also go and visit our studios. So I'm working with a studio in Salt Lake City right now. So pre-COVID, I was going to see them about once a month, working on planning sessions, that kind of thing. And people also, like, if you're interested in production, there's being a producer on the publishing side. I think it's interesting because every day is something new. And it can be really fun to herd cats. I know that it may not seem like it, but I love waking up in the morning and not knowing what my day is going to be like, and that it's always something different. It's also great to be the central point in a game for all parties. So you kind of have that knowledge and you're able to disseminate it. Somebody once told me that a producer is like the quarterback on the football team. His job is to catch the ball and then throw it to the next person and make sure that you guys can get your touchdown. You're constantly learning new people and professional skills. So I constantly find that I'm learning how to make myself a better person and really grow in my skill set. And you do learn a lot that's interesting and can be useful outside of work. There's lots of things that I'm working on within my game, both culturally and technically, that I can take and use sort of in my normal life. And then I think the last thing is like holding the product. Like I often find like I hold this tiny game box in my hand after however many years that I've worked on it and be like, I produced that thing, and it's a really cool feeling. That's why I like being a publishing producer. Tips for being in the industry is my number one thing is don't shy away from a challenge, especially for, if you're not as technically minded, like myself maybe. I often like to reframe things in my own words to make sure that whatever is being told me, I'm understanding it and can kind of articulate it in my own words. Feedback is a gift. Somebody once told me this, and difficult people in your life are teachers. So try to take that feedback and use that to make yourself a better person. I also try to make sure that I'm constantly asking questions and not just telling people what to do. And I think the last thing, especially as a woman in the industry, is to always be tenacious. I had a nickname by one of our studio heads. He called me Tenacious KG. And I never took that as something negative. I always took that as a positive because I think that's the way that I'm able to make my mark and really drive things forward, especially as a woman in the industry. So I am now going to pass this back to Gavin, and he's going to talk through engineering.
Awesome. So engineering, where to start? Kirsten, if you could get all the bullet points up, that would be great. So engineering or software engineering is often called programming, sometimes called developing, being a software developer. In theory, you're coding all of the time, and some people that's exactly what they will be. But even writing the lines of code isn't actually the complex parts of our job. it's working out what to write that actually gets fun and interesting. As an engineer, you're not producing art. You're often not changing the design, though gameplay programmers are often involved with that as well. You are spending a lot of time communicating. You're spending a lot of time finding out what the restrictions are and what needs to happen and how to enable other people to get enjoyment out of the game, or to be able to do the job that they need to be able to do. Like Kimberly was saying, we are learning all the time. It doesn't matter which area of games development you're in, honestly, you will be learning all the time because it is such a dynamic industry. And you have to make smart guesses in order to solve problems as a software engineer. I would say that probably the key thing about software engineering is problem solving. So you need to be able to handle problems when they arise. And sometimes you need to be able to forward predict and be able to see something coming down the road and say, no, we need to drive around that rather than running headfirst into it. Finally, there's a huge difference between writing some code that works versus writing code that's not going to break in the future. And we often call that maintainability of code. Next slide, please, Kirsten. So as a software engineer, what are my tools? Well, you think it's just going to be your IDE or integrated development environment where you write the code. The truth of it is that a lot of our tools are going to Google, researching, going to Stack Overflow, researching, and then and only then writing the code that we need to. Next slide, please. So where to get started in the games industry or in programming in general? It's I personally love Scratch. It's a great tool. In fact, my kids use Scratch and program in Scratch. It's a great way to get involved with just learning how to code in a very simple visual way. And it will teach you to code. Once you have picked something up, take an example, take something simple and then expand upon it. You can create a website, then get that website to display a photo, then be able to upload a photo to that website, then be able to upload a photo to that website from your phone, which is a different challenge, and then get it to randomly display a photo from all of the photos that you've uploaded. So create a gallery. Often our job as a software engineer is not to build something absolutely massive and put it out there. That's how it looks to the user. But to us, really what we're doing is we're building a small part of it. Then we're building another small part of it and adding that in, and then another small part. And so it becomes a very iterative process. And in fact, even those small parts that we're adding are iteratively developed in just the same way. Often we pick something that we don't actually like doing, and this is something that you can do, and automate it. So I've got examples where I don't like manually going through a document and pulling out all of the email addresses so that I can give them access to pieces of the code that we work on. So instead, I write a little piece of code, in this case, a regular expression, to go through and strip all of the email addresses out of a document so that I don't have to manually do it. And that's the type of thing that we do all the time, is just taking something that we don't really enjoy doing, or that is sort of mind-numbing, and automating it. and getting people to where they're spending their time doing the creative work and not busy work. So as I was mentioning, Scratch is a great place to start. Swift Playgrounds, UE4, Unity, Code Academy. My kids once enjoyed something called Code Combat, which is a little action adventure that you have to program the character to do things. And Hacker.io and LeetCode. Next slide, please. So in terms of education for being a software engineer, and being in games, a lot of people think that you need a lot of maths and physics. And some of us use maths and physics more than others, but it's certainly not a requirement. You don't need to be a maths guru or a physics guru to work in the video games industry as a software engineer. In fact, most of the people I work with don't have strong maths backgrounds or strong physics backgrounds. You need to be able to do basic maths, but I think that's true in a lot of jobs these days. But past that, software engineering doesn't require it. There are specific disciplines. If you want to be a physics programmer, you're going to need to know physics. If you want to be a rendering engineer, you're probably going to need to know some math and some physics and a whole heap of other things. It's one of the most challenging disciplines in engineering, in games engineering. So if you're going to college, studying computer science is a really good idea. It's actually what I studied. There were no games programming or games development degrees when I went through university. So I studied software and just computer science in general. The most important thing as a software engineer is just being a good programmer and being a good communicator. If you can do those two things, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. The other thing I'd add is being inquisitive. I think it's a somewhat underrated skill these days, but wanting to know why something works is often the difference between someone who gets by and someone who really excels. So get inquisitive. You also don't need to go to college. You do need to, if you haven't been to college, you would need to show that you've got some experience. But you can get that experience by working on open source projects, working in a team somewhere, or making small games yourself. And yes, you will be able to break into the industry as a software engineer that way. In fact, there's a huge gap in the number of software engineers we've got out there and the demand for them right now. Thanks, Kirsten. Okay, so in terms of getting into your career in the games industry, writing demos is an absolutely amazing thing to do. It's actually how I got my first games job. I wrote a few small demos, and that got me in the door to an interview, and the interview got me into the industry. Do some research and development and learning. YouTube is an amazing resource. Wikipedia is an amazing resource. There are all of these amazing resources online about games development that just weren't even there when I was starting out, and that I personally utilize all the time to stay current. You need to find your passion. I strongly believe that we spend a large amount of our waking life working, at our job. And if you don't enjoy it, well, you're kind of not enjoying a large portion of your life. So one of the best pieces of advice my dad gave me was actually find something you enjoy doing and then find someone who's prepared to pay you to do it. That's pretty good advice. It's probably not the rich dad advice, but it served me well. And so even in software engineering, there are a lot of different roles. You may just love making tools for people. You could be a tools engineer. You may love getting fancy things showing up on the screen and having beautiful graphics. Well, you could become a rendering engineer. You could just enjoy making everyone else's life easier, and then you could be a process engineer. So there are a lot of different roles you can go into, and you can really explore this. And on large teams, there are so many different specialities that you'll probably be able to find something you enjoy, as long as you enjoy engineering, software engineering. So as you develop and go through your career, the type of questions that you're going to ask of yourself or be asked will change from how do I solve this small piece and write code to solve it, to how do I architect this large solution? And I would, a good example or to illustrate this is in like the world of physical engineering. Like most people understand how a car works. Right? It's got an engine, it's generally got a car body, doors, wheels, drivetrain. So if we just look at the engine piece of that, the engine itself is made up of a whole heap of different interconnected pieces. And any one of those pieces doesn't work on its own, and they all have to fit together to be able to make the engine turn and the car drive. So as an individual coder, you might be trying to work out, well, how does the transmission work? And how, what's the gear ratio for gear one? But as an architect, you might be talking about, well, how does the transmission fit into the engine and go with the fuel system and go with the oil system and go with the ... So the question can really change as you develop as a software engineer and as you go up levels, from how do I build this small piece to how do I, what does it look like and what's the framework that we can put all of these pieces together in? And we call that architecture. Eventually you get to the point where you might be overseeing people who are doing the architecture, and you can either develop into in a supervisory role where you're supervising those person and developing their growth, or you can develop into a technical oversight role where you are overseeing the architecture decisions and the engineering decisions that they're making. And both types of people exist in Warner Brothers games. Next slide, please. So on a day-to-day, probably the biggest part of our role is just solving problems. So you're like a detective. You're out there researching, you're out there looking at the existing code, talking to people, communicating, and trying to work out how is this problem being solved at other places? Google is your friend, Stack Overflow is your friend. And then if you can't see something where an easy solution shows itself to you, you have to go in and dig deeper and find, okay, what's actually going on here? You need to get inquisitive, ask questions, and research it to find what's the source of the problem, and then only then can you solve the problem. So when you're fixing something, you also need to be very aware that you don't just fix it to solve the one narrow case that's broken right now, but also to solve as many of the cases as possible. Sometimes that means you actually need to limit the number of cases that come into the code rather than expanding the solution itself. Next slide. Thanks, Kirsten. So here's an example. It's not my personal example. It's one that a colleague of mine encountered. Actually, the colleague that wrote a lot of these slides. And the problem was that he wrote some code that was to be shared to almost all of the studios in WB Games. worked absolutely perfectly on his machine, but it didn't work when that code got moved into the code base of another one of the game studios. So the error was underscore underscore C++ is not defined as a preprocessor macro. What the heck does that mean? So first thing to do is find out if anyone else has run into this problem before. Go and look at Google, ask other people around the studios, have you ever run into this thing before? You need to ask some more sort of basic questions on why hasn't this happened before here? Why didn't this happen to me? What's different between what I'm doing and what this other studio is doing? What it turned out to be was the versions of the software tools that were being used. And the software tools include the compiler that turns the text that we write into code that the computer can understand. Next slide, please. So the code needs to work on everyone's machine, or certainly all of the game studios' machines, not just on the developer's machine. And by the way, that comment of works on my machine is a very common thing to hear. It's kind of a meme in the software development industry. So working out what the solution is going to have lots of dead ends. And the ultimate solution was to version check for the software version before compiling the code. And then you really want to try and work out what you could have done differently to not have this error occur. What practices do you need to put in place so that this type of thing doesn't happen in the future? Also, how could your process be improved? Could you have approached it differently? Is this actually the best solution, or is it just a solution that's going to work for now? Yes. In terms of outlook and attitude for a software engineer, it's really important to be inquisitive and to ask questions and to be eager to learn. I personally am in the games industry, and this is what I've said for a very long time, because every day brings new challenges, new problems to solve. It's a very interesting area of software engineering. Every sort of 7 years right now, we tend to get a new set of games consoles come out. Every year there's new hardware being released for the PC. It's just, there's always change. You're always trying to up your game. And I find that very fun. You want to pick hard problems to solve and try and tackle them. You do this by breaking things down and making smart guesses. You don't always know all of the information, so you have to guess at what the solution could be and then try the solution. And sometimes you're wrong, and you iterate and you get feedback from what does work and what doesn't work to increase your knowledge over time. It's really, really important to be easy to talk to and ask questions of. If you are sitting there as a judgmental person, and I think this goes for anywhere in the games industry, there is so much collaboration involved with so many people. It's very hard to get work done and to get a good outcome. You really need to engage with people and want to engage with people in order for to make a game. And you need to focus on the speed of iteration. Some people talk about a good programmer as a lazy programmer. And what that means is that a good programmer wants to take away all of the guff, all of the stuff that they don't enjoy, and all of the stuff that the other teams around them don't enjoy, and leave them with just the creative fun bits. Cheers. So now we have the little demo that Kirsten was talking about earlier, return of the Obra Dinn. Next slide, please. So Return of the Obra Dinn was a first-person puzzle game, and it was made by just one guy, and that's actually a real exception these days. It's very unusual for a game to be made by one person these days. I'm not sure if he made all of the artwork himself, but I do know of some games where that was the case. Stardew Valley is an example where the guy spent years making all of the artwork and audio and everything. That's a great little game if you haven't played it.
Stardew Valley is amazing.
It
So
is.
fun.
So Return of the Obra Dinn is, as I said, made by one person, and it's available on all the consoles, which is really impressive. And it's about a missing ship that was found in the 1800s. And essentially, there were 60 people on board when it left port, and the ship went missing and none of the people are left. And your job is to go in and try and find out what happened to everyone. Now, you've got some evidence to work with. You've got a painting of everyone on board, a log of everyone and what their jobs and ranks and nationalities were. And then as you explore the ship, you get flashbacks into and memories of what happened. And you need to try and identify what happened to all of these people, what was their fate, and how did it come about. And it's very much a puzzle game. It's very much a problem-solving game where the information isn't clear. The information is a little bit fuzzy. And you have to make smart guesses to try and work out what happened to these people.
We should mention this is not a game that we published, but it's a game that that we feel is a really fun and interesting way to kind of articulate smart guesses in a game perspective. So next slide, sorry.
Awesome. No, great clarification. So this is the painting that you get to as part of the evidence for the game. Slide. Yeah, and this is the part of the crew manifest that you get as well. And so this is an example where we're trying to work out who one of the people on in that picture and in the guidebook actually was. So I think next slide. Yeah, we're trying to identify who that guy is. So we've got a little bit of existing knowledge. We know who the captain and the first mate are. So that one's the captain, that one's the first mate. And we need to work out who this guy is. So we can cross out the captain and the first mate because we know who those people are. But that still leaves a whole heap of people that it could be. Next slide, please. Or step forward. So one of the first things we do is we can look at the hats. And there are some people here who, I mean, there's a whole heap of people with hats, but some of them have matching hats. And you can see the people behind the captain and the first mate have matching hats. And there's a guy right next to the guy that we're trying to identify that also has a matching hat. So we don't know who those three guys are, but we're going to go to the crew manifest and have a bit of a look at it. So there's a second mate, a third mate, and a fourth mate. So there's three of them. We think that that's a pretty good guess on what that hat could mean. It could mean that you're one of the mates of the ship. So next slide, please. So if we look at the positioning, there's probably the guy behind the captain is probably going to be the second mate. The guy behind the second mate is probably going to be the third mate. And that leaves the other guy as being the fourth mate. It's a pretty good guess, pretty reasonable. And this guy is standing right next to the fourth mate. So we're going to go back to the crew manifest for a second. So all of the mates and the captain have a steward. So, could this guy be a steward? So, if the guy standing next to him is the fourth mate, could he be the fourth mate's steward? And that's how we kind of go through a process of guesses and smart guessing to try and solve, to get to information that we didn't have before. So when you're making smart guesses, you tend to not know all of the information. Well, if you're making a guess, you don't know all of the information, but you need to identify what you can do with what you do know. And even if you're wrong, you're going to learn something. A large part of software engineering is in going out and discovering new information so that you can take that information and incorporate it into solutions. So it applies to Obra Dinn, but it also applies to software engineering or programming. Cheers.
And that's our presentation for today. So I believe I'll pass it back to either Kimberly or Jose, and we can start the Q&A.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for such a great overview of, we could be here all week, really breaking down all the nuggets, but I thought you guys did a fantastic job of giving us the headlines that can begin a system of inquiry for so many people that are part of our audience and going to be watching this on the library's YouTube page. Many that are entering and are very entry level, and also a huge part of our community that's transitioning from non-entertainment jobs, looking to see if there's transmutability between existing skill sets into this kind of part of the entertainment world, or also those that are transitioning from traditional film and television that want to get into interactive AR games. It's such a broad, big, new cross-pollination happening between the worlds of narrative and the worlds of game, and both at the festival level and I think at the top high level, it's what we're all talking about at all the conferences and at NAB, and tech's really driving that and how it's impacting all over our world. So I'm really excited to talk to each of you really on a personal level about how this career has been for you, and really maybe beat out a little bit more specifically, I like to have that what do I do on Monday conversation, and going back in your own thoughts. I love that we're getting the opportunity to talk to you because you both have great perspective on how things have changed in the last 20 years, and getting your insight on what's better and what are tools that people can use for accessibility and what's different. There's a lot more people doing it, and what are some strategies to identifying what's the area of how I could learn to figure out if this is a life choice for me. So I'd love to start with you, Kirsten, and just talk a little bit more. I also started at Disney, my very first gig ever. And I was
so fun.
Yeah, I was in TV episodic. There was a place called Touchstone Television, and I was lucky enough to get a PA job on a pilot there. And so that opened the door, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about, and then what happened, right? So talk to me a little bit more about what you thought your life was gonna be, or what were you thinking about or excited about before games came to your doorstep?
Well, I think maybe the best way to talk about this is I started after college as a recruiter, a technical recruiter, and I was when Gavin mentioned not being able to find a job as a software engineer, I was recruiting software engineers for Y2K, specifically because everyone was freaking out and you had to know really old programming language like COBOL, which was the hot ticket item at that time. So I started recruiting tons of engineers, and then I started recruiting project managers and people who sort of manage projects. And I honestly saw how much money they were making compared to what I was making, and I was like, I could totally do that job. And I just was like, I'm going to recruit myself into a project manager position because I felt like that was a better opportunity for me to, you know, make a little bit more money, have a better life, and do something that was more fulfilling and sort of more well-rounded. I really enjoyed and I still enjoy being sort of this like hub to like the hub and spoke approach. So I think, you know, I worked as a project manager in localization. It happened to be that one of my clients was Disney in a gaming group. And then when they were like, hey, you know, would you want to move to LA and come work in the games group here? I was like, wow, that wasn't even something I had considered, but it seemed like such a cool and interesting thing to A, be able to move across the country. I was living in Boston at the time, and B, be able to work in an industry that I didn't have too much insight into, but that was fascinating and just a really great opportunity. And then once I got into the industry, I really fell in love with it. And I also fell in love with the concept of being a woman in production in this industry, which at the time there were very few of us, and it's getting a lot better now. There are a lot more women in our production group, the publishing group here in Burbank, and even throughout the studios. Like every year, you know, we're making inroads and really and really trying to grow that effort.
And it's an admin job, so you're seeing a proliferation on creative on the more creative technical side as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a woman who works in the production group with me on my team as an associate producer. We have 2 or 3 senior level production people working within the Burbank Tech Group. We even have some females within our technology groups at studios. I think somebody was posting a comment about writing on the game that I'm working on, Hogwarts Legacy. One of our lead writers is a woman. So really, it's not just from an admin perspective, or even like the other traditional roles in the video game industry for women have been in the marketing segment, which is still true. Right. But I feel like we're really starting to make inroads on the production and creative side as well.
So we always talk about here at our library series about getting ourselves to the yes. So I really connect when the opportunity came to move to LA. If they asked you Boston in February, I would think that was a really, you know, the weather alone would get you to think about it. But seriously, how did you get yourself to yes? Is that your personality? How did you overcome any fear or concerns that you might have had? A lot of us have dreams or contemplate possibility, but what is it that gets you to yes, that got you over whatever risk you were feeling or trepidation about? The number one thing that we hear is that people don't say yes because they're concerned they don't know enough, or that they'll fail because, well, those people know so much more than me, right? Our own like self limitation. So I'd love to articulate kind of just for you personally, what got you on the plane, what got you to yes? Was there anything specific you remember?
I mean, I think part of it was because I was young and unattached. Like that was a huge piece. There was no reason to say no. And I think the other part of it was I sort of had, it was a little easier for me because I did know LA already. I had been kind of working with clients out here. So I had spent time here. And, you know, kind of knew the neighborhood I wanted to live in and so on and so forth. And I think the third thing is just like, sometimes you just have to like take that step and see what happens, you know, it's kind of exciting. And I sometimes fall prey to that same thing where I'm like, oh, I can't do that for X, Y, or Z reason. And then it's, I was on safari in Africa a long time ago. I worked on a game in Kenya and I had the opportunity to go to the Mara during that process. And when you go on safari, you see the wildebeest go up to the edge of the water, and it just takes one to actually, and you watch them forever, like walk up and then back up, and then walk up and then back up. And it just takes one to cross and then the whole herd goes. So it's that concept of like really being that person to, you know, take that first step. And ultimately it will end up being the right step. And if not, then you pivot and you go a different direction. But you have to try to get
love that. I love the motif of that. And it's so, very relatable. And then Gavin, I'm coming to you in a second. I just wanted to kind of tangent a little bit into along the way as you found a parallel way to leap over to move into something that was similar skill set but maybe had new vocabulary. And as you've escalated being more and more into production to a very successful career at one of the biggest shops in the world, how do you navigate your own self-education? Is mentorship something that was helpful to you as you were like, okay, now I'm in localization? And, you know, who am I talking to bounce things off of, make sure I'm on the right path? And I know Google's a really great resource, but beyond Google, what did you find helpful or useful to help you self-learn?
I think relationship development was huge for me. I remember when I first got to Disney, I had no idea what I was doing. But one of my first directives was to try to figure out how to put film clips into our games. Instead of cinematics, we basically took pieces of the clips from the animated films. And
Yeah.
I had to align we had to figure out a way to strip the voiceover from them and then insert all of the different voices from all of the different.
You were editing.
Well, I wasn't personally doing it, but just the technical concept of how to put that together, one of the vendors that I worked with was the guy who knew how to do it. So I glommed onto him and I was like, teach me how we're supposed to be working on this. And he and I then were super close all throughout like my career. And he was the one that like really introduced me to like, this is how this works. Here's how cinematics works. Here's how the technical background works, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like I've done that in many different instances where if I have a question, like if I have a question about something deeply technical in the game that I'm making now, I have a really great relationship with our technical director at the studio I work with. And I'll just ping him on Slack and be like, I don't understand this. What are you talking about? Can we have a call or can you explain it to me? Or sometimes I'll go to folks like Gavin, who's in our central technology group. And I don't think I'm not ashamed to admit what I don't know, like because I want to learn it. So I'm, constantly asking questions but you have to have built relationships with those people who can answer the questions. So I feel like, yeah, I do research and I'm playing other games and I'm trying to like learn on my own, but I often also find that building relationships and connecting with other people and making sure that I feel comfortable enough to ask them questions is another great way to move forward in that way.
That's so great. Thanks for sharing that. That actually is really relatable and really helpful. And so, Gavin, I'm going to synthesize one of the questions, and then I want to talk to you a little bit more about your on-ramp in your own transition. There's so many people, Gavin, that like you are working in other fields that are non-entertainment. So I know people are really excited to hear more about your transition into games. And but I think that there's a great question about process. It's about and thanks, Maria, for your question. It's a production pipeline question. They just wanted a little bit more information about, do the employees who work on the pitch of a story, is that more of a seasonal situation, or kind of who stays through production? Does the show creator or the pitch person go all the way through? How does that translate into the workflow from beginning to delivery? Can you talk a little bit more about, let's say if it was if it was a TV show, the showrunner might not be the person who actually created or pitched the show, but the showrunner's going to see it through to delivery to network and broadcast. Is there any relatables on your side about a little bit more about how that works?
Do you want me to cover this, Gavin, or do you want to cover this?
Yeah, I think that I read the question and I think it was to you, Kirsten.
Okay, I can answer it pretty quickly. I think games and TV or film are pretty different in that way. So I'll give an example. On the Scribblenauts game that I worked on, the creative director his name was Jeremiah, and he came up with this concept. He worked with his engineer to be able to manifest the concept in code. So the concept behind Scribblenauts is anything you write in the game comes to life. So if you write, you have a little notepad, and if you write in the game, there's a star in a tree, and there's nothing else there, and so you have to write a word in there in order to figure out how to get the star out of the tree. You could use a trampoline, you could use a gopher to cut down the tree, you could use an axe, you could use a chainsaw. All of those are acceptable solutions to the problem. And those two came up with this concept. Then they brought in an art director to create the art around it. And then they pitched it to us. And then, we went through and published the game and so on and so forth. Maya was involved from day one until the very end. And the very end, when I was like, stop adding stuff to this game, we have to finalize it and push it and complete it. And he's like, no, I need to add more stuff to the dictionary. I'm like, you're done, stop.
Yeah.
So he's literally involved, the creative director of a game. And the same thing, Gavin worked at NetherRealm for 15 years. Ed Boon is a huge icon in our industry. Ed is involved from the start all the way through to the end. And that's how most creative studios work. Sefton and our marketing studio who created Arkham, he's involved until the very end. So I don't know television production or film production at all.
Really similar. So really helpful. Yeah, thanks. So Gavin, I'm excited to talk to you about just expanding a little bit more on your own choices and creating your own opportunity, and then what those first couple of steps were like for you as I wanted to go back, why games, or how did games come to you? You were looking for any kind of work. You were trained as a certain kind of engineer. Can you go and fill in a little bit more about how games came into your platform?
I would love to. So, as I mentioned, I had moved across to the UK, and it was actually, I'm one of these weird people. I got married while I was in college. I'm still married to my wife. We're past 20 years now. But we moved over to the UK. She's a veterinarian to work on foot and mouth disease because there was an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. And she stayed there practicing as a veterinarian, and it was my turn now to find a job over there. And I couldn't find one. Everyone wanted a degree from a red brick university at the time. And a red brick university means an old English university. So they weren't really interested in looking at my degree. There were a lot of software engineers out on the market. And so I knew I had to do something. And I'd never really thought about games. I was a big game player. My wife, even back then, my wife and I played video games together. We still play video games together now. So I started writing some demos, and actually they were rendering demos. So it was occlusion culling of a terrain simulation.
You came up as like, I'm going to figure out if I can figure out how my game works. It wasn't necessarily connected to, I got to find a job.
It was definitely connected to, I've got to find a job. I was just trying to write some demos to brush up on my skills, make sure I was up to date, do some research, be able to show people that actually I know how to code. And that led to my first games job. I would say I wasn't specifically looking for games jobs, but I was delighted to get into the games industry. And then it's been great.
That opportunity, or was it on a jobs board? Was it on whatever the social media?
I sent my resume and demos to a lot of different places. In the end, it was actually a friend of mine who was working in the games industry that got my foot in the door. So sometimes that's important, but it really, we see it even today. As part of NetherRealm, I ran the core tech team, which is the engineering team there at NetherRealm. And we have interns or junior engineers that we bring in and help mentor and give them new skill before they start out in the world in general. And
is that like an apprenticeship or
yeah,
kind of like game school, then how we do it here at this company? And is that through let's say an internship program that's posted on that company's website? Or how do apprenticeships?
I don't actually know how it's advertised. If there's someone out there that would like an internship at NetherRealm Studios, you should just email WB Recruiting. In general, for internships, they're looking for whatever language, some knowledge of whatever language is commonly in use at the studio. In this case, C++. And the really the key thing that we see, I would say, differentiate between the people that come in and get internships is actually just going out and doing some software engineering and doing some personal learning.
Okay.
One of our biggest pieces of advice to people that are trying to get involved is go write a demo. Go work on an open source project. Open source projects are huge gateways to getting experience these days. You can
So
go find
when you see that in somebody's portfolio, that resonates for you when you're considering somebody for hiring.
It does, but not only does it resonate with us, that's where we see people really start to differentiate being able to do the job versus just having learned about doing the job. Yeah. So it's a great thing to do. These days there are so many ways to get experience that that don't involve actually working in a software engineering house.
Because I think it makes a lot of people, women, people of color, people from different educational backgrounds, that sounds more welcoming and more like there could be a space for somebody who looks or sounds like me, which is really exciting to hear you articulate that. Can you talk a little, and I think another entry point, especially right now, it sounds like the kind of jobs that you probably, there are a lot of freelancers and work from remote work was, how much was remote work a component of the employees that you have, and how has the last year and a half impacted that? Is there even more opportunity no matter where you live and where you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say a couple of things. Like in software engineering, I think we, and I saw a question on this in the chat, but specifically in software engineering, I think we're vastly underrepresenting a lot of demographics. I mean, if you said that software engineering is straight white guys, you're pretty close to the truth. It's been getting better slowly, but honestly, there aren't a lot of people in the industry to source from, and that makes it very difficult for us to increase our diversity in our teams. Just finding the people is really, really difficult from a recruiting and candidate search. So that's one thing. The last year and a half has vastly changed the landscape on remote working, especially in the field of software engineering. My team, the Central Games Technology team, is 100% remote. None of us are working in a studio. We're all working from our homes. So that was relatively unheard of. Certainly in Warner Brothers, it was unheard of before COVID. So that has definitely changed the landscape. So that I think is a huge leg up to people who, LA's expensive. San Francisco's expensive. Seattle is expensive. There's a lot more opportunity to get involved when you don't have to pay the really large housing and tax potentially costs.
That can be. Listen.
Exactly.
To me, I always like to imagine what it's like when everybody is in a room is a little bit like episode 4 of Mythic Quest. But it is exciting because it does sound like, especially for the bigger companies, understanding that people can contribute and that the games can get done in still a really creative way can still happen extensively remotely. So if I am someone interested in games that's not from a geographical area that's a feeder system into the big shops, what's your recommendation about, okay, been working on some stuff. I've taken Gavin's tips. I've got a little bit of a portfolio built up. Where do I go? And you know, I feel like emailing WB recruiting is another world in and of itself. I feel like I'm just throwing a resume out there. Nobody's going to see it, and they're just going to hire their friends for the job. Can you talk a little bit more, both of you, about realistic ways that people can present themselves, introduce themselves, and really have a shot at those general postings that people are finding on Indeed.com?
Well, I'm going to talk about the software engineering area mostly. There are not enough software engineers right now. There are nowhere near enough software engineers right now. Now, often we're looking for experienced engineers, but the honest truth is we can't find that. We can't find them. There aren't enough. So mentoring and training up engineers from a more junior level is a huge part of how we keep our teams strong and capable of doing the things that they need to do to ship these very complex games. So the first thing I'd say is the industry as it is right now is very much in demand of software engineers. And I think that's true. Almost all industries that need software engineers need more than they can get right now. So right now is a great time if you have experience, if you are willing to do self-learning, if you are willing to put the time in. There are not enough software engineers being trained. There are not enough software engineers out there for our current needs. I think it's the average highest paid job you can get coming out of college, and has been for many years, is actually to come out with a software engineering degree. So like it's a great retrain target for any discipline out there that you can think of. You can add a technical to it, i.e. I can do a little bit of programming and get a higher paid job. You can be a technical artist, you can be a technical designer, you can be
there's so many
different
opportunities, and we'll be pulling together a lot of resources and go-to places where you can learn more of the vocabulary for this industry and more of the job definitions, and you'll be getting that later in the week. We'll be sending you from the library a real big resource stock that's going to collate all the things we've talked about today, and even some more resources we think might be helpful. So Gavin, that's super helpful. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of, I feel like the sky's the limit in terms of the way our industries, from AR, VR, games, interactive, they're different silos still, but there's more, it seems like, I know from the creative end, I'm seeing people that are getting opportunity across all platforms. And if you're a great storyteller, or if you're a great mocap actor, stunt guy, you can get jobs in all these different areas. Can you share a little bit more on the engineering side, if similar transmutations are happening between these evolving tech-generated entertainment platforms? So if somebody learns how to do games, is there room to go learn interactive and kind of grow?
Oh, absolutely. If you haven't heard of virtual production, and probably The Mandalorian is the clearest example, they've kind of coined this.
Volumetric is the word that's starting to become more.
Yeah. So if it's fascinating, and if you haven't seen how The Mandalorian was made, you should go watch a YouTube video on it, because it's absolutely fascinating. But it's basically using real-time game engines to create the scenes and have actors acting out in huge stages with LED panels.
Specialized stages too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say it again, Kirsten.
There's specialized stages that are created for this virtual production, and the back-end tool that's being used is an engine called Unreal, which is the same engine that my game that I'm working on is being built in. So Unreal is being used across now both filmmaking and games. So that's
We're
just
finding a lot of us are learning Unreal on our end. Unreal is even investing in filmmaker education through Tribeca Film Festival. Yeah, can you guys talk a little bit about Unreal is going to be so important to all of us? Can you guys give a real quick introduction of the Unreal company and what they're up to?
Fortnite.
So Epic.
Wait, Gavin's the expert here.
Yeah, Epic is the company that makes the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine, their internal game, the big game that everyone knows about, is Fortnite. They make that internally, but they also license the engine out to a vast array of game developers to make their games on. A whole heap of the games you see coming onto the market are made in Unreal Engine. Over the last I don't know, about 5, 6, 7 years, they've been the engine has been used for all sorts of different things, from architecture and you know, sort of city planning and building planning, right through to more recently virtual production
In the
and
last
using
2
it.
years, they've really
Yeah.
changed the way that production can happen and stage work. I'm producing a feature right now that's going to be using Unreal for the first time as a demo for what we're trying to accomplish, which is a road shooting what would take probably 2 weeks, traveling across the country, everything happening that we could shoot probably in a week and have everybody on one stage, and the end result is so beautiful and seamless that it's going to be really hard to tell that it's effects that's happening. So it's really exciting on our end. So
yeah, I think one of the key things that I would actually say about the Unreal Engine, and that people should be aware of, you can go to Epic's website and you can download the Unreal Engine. I mean, technically, you download it from somewhere else, but like, you can get access to the Unreal Engine for free. You can download it. You can start experimenting. You can learn for it, and you don't have to pay Epic a cent unless you release a product that is making money. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that. You can get full source code to the engine, play around, add new features. You can actually experiment in Unreal Engine and use it as a learning tool. And there is a vast wealth of tutorial videos on the internet for the Unreal Engine. If you want to get into games, you really can't go past just digging into either Unreal or Unity.
That's great advice, and it's a wonderful first step. There is a great question from Marcus. Thanks, Marcus. Just a specific, do you have the title? What would somebody look for if they were on the design side and wanted access? What's the job called, that entry level kind of job on design side? Marcus wants to know what a good entry level position would be. What would it be called? What would he look for on a board?
Gavin, I mean, I feel like really it could be a level designer. It could be someone who is actually sort of like a gameplay designer.
Okay.
There's a lot of different sort of and it depends on the kind of game. It depends on their type of.
But at least that's a place to start. In terms of giving to some specific names is really helpful. I hope
anything with like the junior, like sometimes we'll have like a junior level designer or junior designer, those kinds of things.
Or associate. Associate's another word for the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. We're going to wrap it up soon. I know we don't have much time and want to thank you both, but I do want to talk about a few more things. One, I want to talk a little bit more globally about the public perception of the situation for women in games, and Kirsten, your perspective on how that's changing, and not to be afraid to come change the culture. You got to be in the culture, and Gavin also in terms of we are seeing a lot of designers of color and women doing independent games and smaller games. If you went and worked for a smaller shop, like there's these great guys in Maryland and they brothers and they built their own shop and now they've got a bunch of guys. That's the thing that's been really exciting that I see about games is all over the country and all over the world. People are growing the next epic, right? And so the next 10 cents starts in somebody's garage, right? So if I go and jump on one of those games and don't make a lot of money, I'd love for you to talk about, after we talk about kind of girls in the business, transitioning. Are you going to hire somebody that's been in a small shop doing a small game that had maybe not as much impact? Okay.
Yes.
So
Honestly, like
those
to echo what Gavin just said, like we are, half of my week right now is finding people to finish my game. Like, I mean, we are, and at this point in our game, we need like very senior level, highly seasoned people. It doesn't matter if you've come and worked on a small game versus a large one. I mean, I have a close friend that started an indie game company that I worked with back at Vivendi when I worked at another one of my jobs in the past. He started a small games company, kept it small, kept it independent, and it just got bought by Netflix. So there's a lot of opportunity, and just because you're at a smaller indie game studio, it doesn't mean that your work is any less. I mean, another sort of one of the icons in our industry is named Tim Schafer, and he created this company called Double Fine. They made Psychonauts and a bunch of other like really iconic indie games, and they were just bought by Microsoft. So there's tons of opportunity for indie gamers. We will take people that have a wide variety of experience from a wide variety of backgrounds, and we need it. Like I'm talking to some people about diversity in the industry, and it is something that we are working really, really hard on. Not just getting more women in the industry, but people of color, more LGBTQ people in the industry. And it's something that I literally talk about every single day. It is a huge, something that we're actually doing. We're trying to open the door.
It's a priority in terms of your recruitment.
And it's really hard work, but like we work with GLAD, we work with cultural sensitivity consultants because we want to make sure that not only the people within our game studios are as diverse as we can be, and we're not there yet, like by any means, but we're working towards it, but that also our games themselves and the characters and NPCs and the avatars,
storytelling is inclusive.
Also is inclusive, and that is a huge priority.
So let's speak a little bit more about women, and the stories that have come out of even so recently is what's going on at some of the bigger companies that shall remain nameless for the sake of this conversation. What do women need to know about the realities of navigating a career in this business, both on the creative and on the tech side, in relation to what we're hearing all of the time?
I mean, look, I've had a really, I must have had a very sheltered experience in this industry because I have had, like working at Warner Brothers has been amazing. I've never had any inkling of sort of, I think a lot of what has happened like with Gamergate and with what's going on in the news right now, to me in any way, shape or form. But I definitely think that you just need to constantly be aware and stand up for yourself and make sure that your voice is heard. And it just goes back to that tenacity thing. I really think so. And now it's a lot easier for people to come forward and say this, I didn't appreciate this, or I didn't appreciate that. But even in, regardless of your gender or status, like you just need to make sure that you're respectful to people and that people are respecting you. I had a conversation yesterday. We had a call and somebody sort of didn't respect somebody else on the call. And then I got phone calls from the people that were upset. And I had to then have the hard conversation with the other person. And it doesn't matter whether that person is a male or a female, a non-binary, anything. It's just like, be respectful to other people, make sure that you yourself are being respected and stand up for, what you believe in and what you believe is right and how you want to be treated is probably the best advice that I can give a woman in the industry.
That's really great. I love the encouragement, and I wholeheartedly second that feeling. Can you both speak a little bit about, especially for entry level or those transitioning in, reasonable expectations of Labor Day? Kind of is a 12-hour day reasonable if I'm being asked to do more than a 14-hour day and I'm a low level, and the team, what's appropriate, what are we aspiring to do, what's realistic, and what's over the bound. So if you're coming out of high school, you're coming out of college, you're in your first couple of years somewhere, at what point do you guys feel, what do they need to know to protect their day?
So this is me personally. I think crunch is awful. There's so much evidence out there that supports that crunch is counterproductive, that you can essentially you can only have people working long hours for maybe 2 weeks before actually you're already going backwards and you have less productivity than you would have had.
Yeah.
All of the places that I've worked, and certainly this is true at Warner Brothers Games, in the last, well, I guess I've only been working at Warner Brothers Games. Oh, there was Peeps. If you were wondering what Peeps sounds like, that was Peeps.
How long
essentially,
normally?
It's an 8-hour day. It's a standard 8-hour work day. Some people, if you're in the middle of a problem and you just want to get it completed and you're in the zone, you will, often people will stay past the end of the day in order to get that done because they're in that flow. But that's generally or almost never actually stipulated as you have to work late hours.
Okay. It's
games,
becoming less. Oh, sorry, Gavin, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, games is a very dynamic and deadline-driven and complex industry. There are almost always situations at some point during a game where you will work additional hours in order to try and keep on track and keep on target so that you can ship your game. Towards the very end, where the marketing push has started, it's very likely that you can't move when the game is shipping anymore. And that is where you're most likely to get some crunch coming in.
A little overtime. Yeah. And so, Kirsten, thank you. That's really helpful to know. Any other advice for newbies in the business in terms of expectations that they should know going into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays, given how much has come out around the culture of like long hours and crunch, a lot of companies are really trying to avoid that. That said, and a lot of times what will happen is you'll push for a handful of days up to a milestone, or you'll have to, everybody will have to sort of collectively crunch together for maybe a month or two before you submit to get as many bugs addressed as possible. But if a project is planned well, you shouldn't have to do that. So like if your producers and the studio heads and everybody else is actually, planning the job in the best way possible and understanding how long a particular task is going to take, then they should know that you can only get X of Y done within Z period of time, and then you shouldn't need to crunch. Yeah. It just doesn't always happen that way. But the industry as a whole is, I think, really trying to move away from crunch because it's just been such a bad stain from a PR perspective.
Yeah.
So I do think, like, in general, you can expect normal 40-hour work weeks peppered with some times when you're going to have to, get
deadline.
I don't work 40 hours, but like it's not in, I have to get stuff done. I'm constantly working. So a lot of it depends also on what you're willing to do and how willing you're able to, like, how willing and open you are to just being constantly on.
Yeah, totally. Well, we want to thank both of you so much for spending so much time with us this morning. This has been so encouraging and insightful for those that are navigating their way into the games industry. So we want to thank everybody here. Please hear our virtual applause for both of you. Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody from our library audience. Always good to see you. We'll see you guys in a couple more weeks. Jose is going to join us to tell you about our next gathering and more information about what's coming up this week. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank all three of you. Was a fascinating conversation. I hadn't seen so much engagement in the chat in a long time. So kudos to you for spurring on those questions and for addressing so much for the questions and staying on a little bit after. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Our next Creative Career Paths event will take place Saturday, November 6th, and will feature Colin Fitzpatrick from Netflix Music Creative Production Team. To learn about creative career paths and see past recordings and some of the resources list that you might have missed, please visit lacountylibrary.org/creative-career-paths. I'll be sure to include that in the email coming out next week. And if you have any other ideas of the kind of professions you want to see featured as part of this series, please let us know. We want to make sure to be addressing your needs and your wants. And if you're interested in participating in any more about upcoming programs, please visit lacountylibrary.org/virtual-programming. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.